Today's the day. The FNAF movie will come out and we've been waiting 8 years for this moment. And while in the coming weeks I'll try to give some good insight as to the lore and how it connects to the games, for today I wanted to get out something right now, so we're just gonna go over every single Easter egg and secret I could find in this movie. One of the challenging things about this list is figuring out what counts as an Easter egg and what counts as just faithful adaptation. Like, the animatronics are such good replicas of the games, but that's not really an Easter egg, that's just a good adaptation. So some of these Easter eggs might fall into that category, but honestly I'd rather be too corrective in that area and just include things that aren't Easter eggs, just good adaptation moments, rather than leave something out in the fear that it's not an Easter egg. And then I could have missed something. That being said, there will be spoilers for the movie. To avoid copyright, I'm not going to be showing any footage, just screenshots. But we're talking about Easter eggs here, so I'm going to be talking and showing screenshots from the entire movie. You've been warned, but also I'll be going sequentially, so the risk of spoiler is just going to be increased over time. You could probably watch the first couple minutes and not be that spoiled, but if you watch to the end, you're gonna know the majority of the plot. So without any further ado, let's get started. Slices, here is every Easter egg in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. We open on the Universal logo glitching out like many of the games do for effect. And with the Universal logo on screen, it's probably a good time to mention this. The SAG-AFTRA strikes are still going on, and I fully support the actors and stand with them. Now, this movie was made by Blumhouse, which isn't a struck company, but it was distributed by Universal, which is. So, screw you, Universal. I hope you lose. Moving on, we immediately get our first shot of the FNAF 1 office, and while it's not super clear right now, we can still see some references. We get the exact Celebrate poster from the games, even though the models are slightly different because of the Easter egg. We also get the exact same red striped cup, crumpled paper, and fan on the desk. The shots on the camera feeds are mostly new angles for the movie, but there are some similar ones from the games, namely Pirate Cove. We also can see some of the rules poster here, but it does seem like it was changed for the movie. We then get to see that the vents are an exact recreation from the vents of FNAF 2. Well, not in location and format, but in appearance. They have that same dented box look to it. In the next shot, we get the song that copyright claimed everybody from the trailer, Talking in Your Sleep by the Romantics. Now, the song itself being here isn't technically an Easter egg, but the lyrics and the year it was released, I think, are. The important lyrics of the song that get repeated pretty much every time they perform it are, I hear the secrets that you keep when you're talking in your sleep. And keep in mind, this song was released in 1983, which is a very important year in the timeline and possibly when the bite victim was, well, bitten. But it definitely was the year that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was introduced. I've got 7 pages. I think I just need one more if that indie game didn't lie. And I mean, a stranger on the internet made it, so of course he'd tell the truth. Today's video is sponsored by Temu. What? Uh-oh. Oh wow. I got all this stuff from Temu. For anyone that somehow doesn't know, Temu is an online marketplace where you can get anything you can think of for a crazy good deal. The entire app has savings up to 90% off, free shipping, free returns for 90 days. You even get a $5 credit if your delivery is late, and they have price protection policies where if you buy something and within 30 days the price drops, you can request a partial refund to get that price. And I mean, look at everything I was able to get on Temu. This desk-wide mousepad that looks so clean for $7. I even got a costume for Casey for $1.50. Look at him, he's so handsome. He loves it. And I got this giant boba for $4, this adorable little Highland cow for $6, and my FNAF fans are gonna love this one. Look at my man, look at him, so handsome, so kind. Only $8, look at this funny little guy. These are my 3 favorite things I got from this haul. I got a brand new controller for my Switch, $18, this Stanley-like cup for $12, and this full body leaf shaped and colored blanket for $9. Why are these my favorite, you ask? Because now I can cuddle up in my blanket, drink hot chalky, and play my Switch. I can't stress enough to you guys how nice all this stuff was and how great the deals are. It's crazy how much money you can save here. And Temu has a treat for you. If you go into the description, you can click on the link and go straight to the Temu site. Search my code DKA8999, that's DKA PKA8999 and you'll get a $100 coupon bundle, which is just insane. I've also included all the stuff I got from Temu in the description as well, which is even more than what I've had time to show here. Not to mention, if you apply that coupon bundle, you could get the Nintendo Switch OLED for $259, which is an insane price because Nintendo stuff never goes on sale. So yeah, link in the description. Thanks again, Temu, for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so I've got all 8 pages. What happens now? Soon after, we get Foxy knocking out the previous security guard. And in this moment, we get a reference and an Easter egg. The reference is to Foxy humming his usual song. Again, like, is that a faithful adaptation or an Easter egg? I don't know. What I do think is an Easter egg is how he attacks him, running down the left hallway, just like he does in the games. Now, the machine thing in the workshop. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I'll save it for a lore video because honestly, we do not get an explanation for this machine at all, ever. It just is there. Looking at it, it's like this ashy gray Freddy head. Part of me for a moment thought that was going to be Shadow Freddy, but I think we have a better candidate later on in the movie. Also, this isn't an Easter egg, but if you're confused on how Michael survived this trap later in the movie, the security guard loosening the screw in this shot is the reason he's able to break free. In the next establishing shot, we see these classic weird clouds on the Freddy stage, and then we finally get the drawing wall. At first, I thought this was going to be just a cavalcade of Easter eggs, but going through these, none of these drawings exactly match anything from the games that I could find. However, the drawings themselves do have some references therein. There's this drawing of Balloon Boy, who we'll talk about later in this video for sure. There's one with a kid named David, and I hesitate to say that this is an Easter egg for the kid named David from the story The Mimic, only because that seems like a stretch, but to be fair, this is the only named kid on the entire wall, so it does feel important. There's also this picture, which has what looks like it could be Chica's Magic Rainbow, but there's a definite reference to it later on, so this might just be a coincidence. We then get the opening credits, which as a whole is an Easter egg to the lore minigames throughout the franchise, but I do think this moment specifically is meant to reference this moment in FNAF 4, where we see someone put on a suit in a back room in a very similar fashion. Also, the balloons given to the kids match the same colors as the Happiest Day balloons from FNAF 3. Moving on to Mike. He's introduced with his alarm clock turning on in darkness, in reference to how most of the nights of the games end with 6 AM in darkness. Also, this is kind of a stretch, but this shot of the side table kind of feels like a reference to FNAF 4, specifically how the pills on the side table can appear rarely in that game. By the way, I did check those pills and it looks like they're Loprazolam, which are in fact a sleeping pill. I tried to do some research into the book that Mike has with him, and as far as I can tell, it isn't a real book, which makes me think that the title Dream Theory is a deliberate reference to the very common theory back in the FNAF 4 days, where it was purported that the original story of FNAF was intended to be the nightmares of the FNAF 4 protagonist, which was later retconned in Sister Location. I'm not saying that theory is true, but I am saying that this title feels like a direct reference to that theory. Very quick aside, I have 2 bounties for this movie. What I mean by that is there's 2 things that I'm very curious about but can't find solid evidence for, so I'm putting out into the ether for one of you to find. The first one is Nebraska. Why? Granted, it could just be a random location. Now, I do want to specify, I don't mean like, why does he have a poster of Nebraska? I understand that's where Garrett was taken. My question is, why was Nebraska chosen for that point of the plot? If anyone can find any evidence or reasoning for that, that'd be great. Granted, it could just be randomly picked to separate it from Hurricane Utah. I don't know. I just want to make sure I'm not missing some obscure reference here. Moving on to that definite Chica's Magic Rainbow reference I was talking about earlier, this ice cream parlor, and yeah, that's 1 for 1. Then the security camera actually gives us a couple references. You could argue that camera 2 is a reference to how the camera 2 has been in like every FNAF game with security cameras, but much more strongly than that, we get a piece of information and an Easter egg. The date on this camera is April 6, 2000, which 1 tells us that this movie takes place in the year 2000, but 2, the first FNAF movie teaser dropped on April 6th. Moving on to Steve Raglan. Now, I'm not the first one to point this out because he was in the trailer, and it's more of character design than an Easter egg, but I thought it was worth bringing up. In this shot, Matthew Lillard is dressed in a yellow-based shirt with a purple tie, and the interesting part about it is the fact that he's pretending to be Steve Raglan when when really he's William Afton. In the games, whenever William Afton is pretending to be Spring Bonnie or an otherwise like innocent demeanor, he's portrayed with yellow, like we see at the end of Fruity Maze and arguably like we see in Midnight Motorist. But whenever he's actively doing a murder or something like that, he's always been purple. So you could argue that purple represents William Afton, whereas yellow represents his hidden exterior. And in this shot, we see literally that, where there is a yellow exterior of what he's currently presenting, hiding the purple inside him. The name M.X.E.S is also interesting. For one, it's an Easter egg because in the FNAF 1 games, M.X.E.S is the name of the player character. But the way William reacts to that name gives me pause. He reacts specifically to the name, not Michael's face, which he then starts to look at after he reads the name, but the name, which to me implies that M.X.E.S is actually Josh Hutcherson's character's name. The reason that gives me pause is in the FNAF games, it's pretty widely accepted that Michael Afton is the player character in FNAF 1 using the fake name M.X.E.S. So this would be arguing that his real name in the movie is M.X.E.S, therefore not Michael Afton. And here's bounty number 2. I mentioned I had to, this is the second one. I spent an hour and a half, and mind you, I'm making this video within like 20 hours. So that was a big part of my process, but I spent like an hour and a half trying to find anything to link this map in the office to. It looks like a township or county map, and I just can't tell. I tried Hurricane, Utah, I looked around Nebraska, I looked around Utah, I even looked around Louisiana, which is where they filmed. So if anybody can link a real world location to this map, it just might give us the location of Freddy's in this continuity. Okay, really quick, it's like 8 p.m. Friday. Editing Riley, we have a break in the case. Hyperdroid noticed that this movie takes place in Minnesota. So with this map, that's your lead. I did some looking for like 20 minutes, but I can't find anything. Your lead is the movie takes place in Minnesota. So maybe this is a county or district or township somewhere in Minnesota. Best of luck. Also, it shouldn't have to be said, but it will be said right now. I need to specify 2 very important things. 1, even if we can find a real world location that this map correlates to, that doesn't necessarily mean that this map represents canon information of where Freddy's is located. It could just be a stock asset they had. But number 2, and this is the most important one, if we do find a real world location this map correlates to, do not go there and harass people. Don't go there at all. It's just a fictional story. Nothing is actually going to be there. We're not trying to harass an innocent township. We're just trying to find a setting. Later at Abby's school, we get a chalkboard with a lot of spelling words. And of those spelling words, we get bunny, bear, chick, fox, and puppet, implying the FNAF 4 crew plus the puppet, which would have been at the original Freddy's location. Now, before we get to Mike's first night at the location, I think it's worth noting that Mike does in fact spend 5 nights at Freddy's. Granted, he goes to the location 6 times, but the 5th time he goes is during the day, so he only goes for 5 nights, so they made good on the title. On our first night, we get our first of 3 total Balloon Boy jump scares, which is insane to me. Granted, it's just the toy Balloon Boy, but it feels so weird that they did it 3 times, and each time implied something supernatural going on. I don't know. Hey, here's my out there theory without doing any research onto the theory. What if Garrett was killed and then possessed Balloon Boy, and this is Garrett reaching out to Mike? Is that true? Probably not. I mean, it's just off the dome. In the next shot, we get a decent look at the prize counter, and besides just the normal Funko plushes that are usually representative of merch, we also get a reference to the cursed rubber Chica mask. And I know it's on purpose because he just doubled down in it in Freddy in Space 3 right before the movie came out to promote the movie. So I know they know about that cursed mask, and I know this is a reference to it. Easter egg. Later, in Mike's dream, we get the 5 kids of the missing child incident. We never get their names in the movie, but if the books and games are to be believed, we can assume that their names are Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Gabriel. And this center blonde kid being Golden Freddy, aka either being Cassidy or the crying child. More likely the crying child. And yes, we still don't have a goddamn name that's evidence back for this kid. After that first night, we get our first of a surprising 2 references to Sparky the dog. For anyone who doesn't know, one of the very early, if not one of the first hoaxes of the FNAF franchise is Sparky the dog, a fake animatronic that was purported to be real, non-harmful, and just an Easter egg in FNAF 1. The restaurant here is named Sparky's, which at first I could have assumed was just like an accident or coincidence, but with the second reference, and they double down, and you know that this is on purpose. hilarious. But even more aptly, at Sparky's, we have our first of 2 YouTuber cameos. Well, in-person cameos. And that is MatPat. He even says it's just a theory. But if you pay attention, not only is MatPat on screen, his name tag says M.E.S, in reference to the very controversial Sans is M.E.S theory. And I just really love that they managed to put an Easter egg inside of an Easter egg. That's just cool. Back at the pizza place, we get to see "It's me" written in the mirror, the calling card of Golden Freddy. Then when Vanessa buzzes into the office, we get the exact same sound effect that the lights use in FNAF 1. Later, during the break-in, we see on the monitors the classic Cam 1A angle, that being the stage with the 3 animatronics on it. Then there's probably the clearest shot of the Employee of the Month board we get, and this is just chock full of FNAF tubers. We've got Fusion Z Gamer, Baz, Razbowski, Dalko, 8-Bit Ryan, Crofteria, and DJ Sturf on there. There's more people on this, but it's hard to see and it's kind of blurry, so if you recognize anyone else on this, put it in the comments. I'm so curious. Later in the break-in, it's not really an Easter egg, but more of a blink and you miss it moment, but once the cupcake starts messing with Carl in the kitchen, you can see Chico walking in the background behind the fan. Speaking of, this guy is 2 Easter eggs in one. First, he's wearing a Midnight Motorist shirt, but second, he gets killed by the cupcake, and that's notable because his name is Carl. For those of you who don't know, a common fan theory is that the cupcake's actual name is Carl the Cupcake. So this seems to be a light nod towards that, even though the promotional material for the movie just calls him either Cupcake or Mr. Cupcake. Speaking of death references, Hank is killed in a method that's very reminiscent of Silver Eyes. In the Silver Eyes, Dave, or William Afton, breaks free of his containment and runs into the office, locking himself inside. It protects him from Chica, who's in the hallway, who's then going to attack the other people, but he notices that Bonnie was already in there waiting for him. And Hank runs away from Chica, locks himself in a room by accident, and Bonnie's in there waiting for him. Later in the workshop, we see him, the dog. Sparky the dog is real. Also, next to him is, I think, the most likely candidate for Shadow Freddy. After all, it's a purple suit that kind of looks like Freddy. At first, I thought this was going to be the purple guy hoax from FNAF 2 that looked like this, since it's next to Sparky the dog and everything, so 2 hoaxes next to each other would be a fun reference, but looking at the face of the animatronic, it definitely looks more like Freddy. This head in the background is incredibly reminiscent of Withered Foxy, but it's kind of dark and out of focus, so I could see it being Twisted Wolf or something else. Finally, this isn't an Easter egg, but can we talk about Max being bit in half? Because holy shit. Back at the house, Abby is watching the 1939 short film, A Day at the Zoo. I watched the whole thing to see if there was anything that could be linked to Freddy's, and I couldn't find anything. I could just be missing something, but there's 2 other explanations. Either, the most likely scenario, it was just a stock copyright-free asset that they used. But consider it came out in 1939. And if the Fredbear Sing and Show ticket is as old as it looks, then the Fredbear Sing and Show that later inspires William Afton to create Fredbears, or later likely inspires him, it's still a theory, it could have started all the way back in 1939 and then later down the line inspired William Afton. I don't know, it's possible. We also see this sun clock on the wall, which is likely a reference to a very similar sun clock we see in the FNAF 4 house in Sister Location. When they get back to the pizzeria, we finally get an up-close shot of the chairs in the place, and they look strikingly similar to the FNAF 1 chairs. And once again, I have to sit here and ask myself, is that an Easter egg, or are they doing a faithful adaptation? I really can't tell the difference anymore. And then later we see the back of Foxy's head, which is notable because there's a piece of duct tape holding his eye patch in place. Now, for those who don't know, in FNAF 1, the model was made a little inconsistently for Foxy, and because of that, his eye patch actually doesn't attach to anything. It just kind of floats there. So I'm pretty sure this duct tape is an Easter egg to that fact. Bro, Mark's fur is getting everywhere, and my nose is dying. Then we see the most wild reference in the entire movie. This is a big spoiler, so if you've been watching before seeing the movie, this might want to be your cutoff. In Ella Doll Springlock suit in the back row. Now, for those who don't know, the Ella Doll animatronic was actually 4 animatronics from the Silver Eyes novel trilogy. The plot of the Silver Eyes is that when William Afton kills Charlotte Emily, Henry Emily goes into just a manic state. He starts even believing that the Ella Doll is actually Charlotte Emily, and to make up for that, he makes 4 animatronics in the likeness of the Ella Doll at different stages of her life. A toddler, a young child, a teenager, and an adult. Those turn into separate characters throughout the whole time, but the child is what is turned into the Ella Doll after Charlie ages out of it. This Springlock Ella Doll would probably be the youngest stage, which begs the question, is Henry in here? Does the Silver Eyes happen in this continuity? Because I don't see how that tracks with the William Afton we see. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So is this guy in the background, or even Mike's dad, Henry? I'm not sure. It's crazy, but this Easter egg cupcake is insanely cool. Now, we knew going into it that Markiplier wouldn't be in the FNAF movie because he was too busy filming for Iron Lung. And both Markiplier and Scott have stated that there's no animosity. Scott even commented on one of his videos saying that he understands, he can't wait for Iron Lung, and maybe in the future if they get to do a FNAF 2 movie, they'd love to have him on. That being said, I have a guess as to what Markiplier's cameo was going to be if they left the scene in and just casted an actor, and it was this pharmacy scene. Something about it felt right, like it was the right length, it focused on the side character just enough for a good cameo, and I thought Markiplier would have been a great fit for it. So maybe this was where Markiplier was planned to be, but he couldn't make it. Or it's just a scene. You know, they could have just cut whatever scene Markiplier was supposed to be in, I don't know. We then get this scene with Golden Freddy, but interestingly, they went with the FNAF 2 version of Golden Freddy and gave him blue eyes. My theory behind this isn't necessarily that it is the FNAF 2 Golden Freddy, but more of a logical and stylistic choice. Logical because it never really made sense why Golden Freddy would have been refurbished in the first place and was probably more of a side effect of Scott not super planning the story until like FNAF 3 or 4. And for stylistic choice, let's face it, in a dark settinged movie, gold and brown are pretty similar, so it could have been confusing for audiences who aren't sure what Golden Freddy is if there's suddenly a Freddy that looks pretty similar to the other Freddy showing up and maybe there's two. So the missing ear and slightly different bow tie and hat help to really sell that point. But it's also worth noting that we get two semi-references here. This whole scenario is very reminiscent of Midnight Motorist, where a three-toed animatronic is luring a child out of their home. But it's also reminiscent of the Fazbear Fright story Coming Home, where Chica is leading Susie back to the Pizzaplex where she belongs. This is after Susie died. Oh, okay, well, see ya. There's so much fur. Don't actually know where the Freddy Pillow Pet went, so you're dealing with him. Then we get the Corey X Kenshin cameo that we saw in the trailer where he's driving the taxi. We also get this photo in the scene where it's revealed that William Afton is behind all of this. And this photo is very reminiscent of the William Afton photo we see in the Silver Eyes, except instead of Henry, there's a young Vanessa. So again, is Henry in here or not? Because on one hand we have the Ella doll, but on the other hand, he would have been in that photo if he was. Finally, we move on to night 5, the final fight. Once again, we get a slight reference to Coming Home as Chica is the one who leads Abby into the back room. When the cupcake attacks, it makes a growling noise like a dog. This could be a subtle reference to a fan theory. We know that when Susie was killed, she was lured into the back room with the promise that her dead dog was fine and back there. The fan theory suggests that William Afton is the one that killed Susie's dog in order to lure her back there, and that her dog's ghost moved into the cupcake when she moved into Chica. Foxy cornering Abby in the arcade is an Easter egg for the Silver Eyes again, where the opening action shot teaser is of Charlie being cornered in the arcade by Foxy. After that, we see the boy, Springtrap is here, and he looks great, I gotta say. Well, technically, this is still Spring Bonnie, because William Afton is alive and using a actually functioning Spring Bonnie suit. He becomes Springtrap later on. Once we see him, he's defeated in a way that references both the Silver Eyes and the Fourth Closet. A drawing is made that shows the ghosts that William is not who they think he is, and in fact the one who killed them, which references the Fourth Closet. And then, after the spring locks fail on him and he's a twitching corpse on the ground, all the animatronics drag him away while the main characters leave the building, which references the Silver Eyes. Of course, we also get the Easter egg of him saying, "I always come back," as well as a reference to the FNAF 3 teaser shot and FNAF 3 ending cutscene of Springtrap twitching alone in a back room. Finally, the credits have a few Easter eggs themselves. We start with the music box version of Toreador March that Freddy plays when you run out of power and the classic Freddy laugh, and then immediately shift into, you knew it was gonna happen, we all thought it was gonna happen, Five Nights at Freddy's by the Living Tombstone as the main credit song, and it was such a good moment. One of these photos could possibly be a reference to Freddy in space, but that's kind of a reach. Our mid-credits scene we get is of Balloon Boy again jump scaring someone, this time seemingly opening and closing a taxi door and jump scaring Corey X Kenshin. And then some hints into what I think are a sequel, because the credits then continue into the FNAF 2 music box song, and the very end of the credits have the FNAF 2 voice spelling out COMEFINDME, come find me, with again the FNAF 2 music box playing. Part of me wonders, is this an Easter egg, or is there an actual puzzle slash ARG hidden in the movie somewhere? I mean, there's 3 jump scares of Balloon Boy, maybe the time codes are some kind of code. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. And that's everything, or every single Easter egg that I could find. Let me know if I missed anything down below, I'm really curious. I've scrubbed this thing, watched it 2 times. I watched this movie at 5 p.m. yesterday, and then I just wrote this script overnight and I'm recording this the morning of. So like, I probably missed something in my like tired stupor. In the meantime, if you want some lore from the actual games, last week I made a theory on where I think Glamrock Foxy is is in the latest FNAF game. You can check that out right here. A huge shout out to the Dough Risers, the best channel members around, and until next time as always, stay toasty slices.